Now, if we were to drill into the Earth, the first layer, of course, we would find would be the crust. The crust is our solid rock outer layer of the Earth. It's the one we live on. It's the one that has soil and everything is growing. Our mountains, our rivers, everything is on that crust. It is, in fact, the thinnest layer, though. So I'll show you a quick diagram of all the layers of the Earth. This is the kind of thing you can find online really easily. Just Google layers of the Earth. But sometimes it helps to make these things yourself. Just underneath the crust is our mantle, and the mantle is the largest layer underneath the crust. The crust is technically like all around everything, but the mantle is super, super thick. So it has a lot more area inside of it. And it's so hot that all the solid rock that's in the crust is liquid in the mantle. It gets melted. It gets hotter and denser as you go deeper into the core, partly because it gets hotter when you get closer to the heat source, which is the inner core. But the gravity makes it denser because all these layers are pushing down on each other. So by the time you get to the outer core, all of the liquid that's there is just metal, which is sunk to the bottom, because metal is a lot heavier and denser itself than rock. It's still liquid, though, because it is so hot. The thing is, when things become really dense, they can no longer flow like a liquid anymore. So once you get to the inner core, all of that metal becomes solid, even though it's so hot that it actually should be melted if it were ever under a little bit more space and less pressure. So as you go deeper, it gets hotter. As you go deeper, it gets denser. And the outer and innermost layers are solid, while the middle two layers are liquid. An easy way to think about the layers of the Earth is by thinking about an apple. Like the layers of the Earth, the outer layer of the apple is kind of a little more solid than what's inside. You don't really have any juice on the outside of this apple. It's just sort of a crust. And the Earth has the outer crust as the thinnest layer as well. And similarly, in an apple, the outer layer, the skin, is also the thinnest layer. But when you dig deeper, it's really juicy inside. The Earth is the same way. You dig into the crust far enough, and most of us can't get this far, you start to find mantle, you find the outer core and the inner core. And the mantle and outer core are both very liquidy, very juicy. Now, the deeper you go in the apple, the denser it gets as well. The more tightly packed it gets. I'm gonna see if I can eat this whole apple to get you to the core. Here's Oliver, he likes apples. He thinks he's gonna get some. Ooh, is that apple? No, not yet. Let me finish first. And eventually you get so deep in the core that it becomes solid. It's so tightly packed. The liquid molten iron can't flow around anymore because there's so much gravity pushing down upon it that it's stuck in place. And the pressure of all those outer layers forces it together to be solid iron core instead of liquid. Like that, the core of an apple is super dense and tough and not very juicy. Just like the core of the Earth is not at all juicy. One thing to know about going deeper into the layers of the Earth is that as you go deeper, the layers get hotter. The only place where life can exist is on the outer layer of the Earth, the crust. We live on the crust. The crust is cool because the crust is the outermost layer exposed to outer space. Outer space is super cold. There's no any warmth there. Even the sun doesn't really have any heat that sticks around in space because there's no atmosphere to trap it. So our crust is basically lava exposed to the cold vacuum of space that has frozen back into rock. I think of the crust kind of like this habanero sauce. It's mild, but this green bottle lets you know that it's mild and also lets you know things can grow on it. So let's give it a little taste. Ooh, that's very tasty. Some good habanero sauce. Whew. Okay. But obviously the crust is warm enough that we can survive. It's not like it's freezing cold, covered in ice glacier. It's not an ice age. It's just mild. Something we can live on. We think of the crust as the coldest layer, but it's the layer that we're used to, so it's really just mild. Now, as you go into the mantle, you get to a layer that we would consider hot. It's got magma and lava that erupts out of it if the magma gets so boiling hot that it erupts in volcanoes. And it's so hot that it can melt down rocks. That takes a lot of heat. And so this is actually the biggest layer. It's mostly just this hot sauce. So let's try it. Ooh, that's very good too. Ooh, geez, that's hotter than the previous one. Go figure. But then as you go deeper, you get closer to the real source of heat, which is the core. And there's two layers of the core. The outer core is very hot. I have this fiery hot habanero pepper sauce. And this would represent the outer core. It's hotter than the mantle because it's deeper and closer to the source of heat inside of the Earth. It's so hot that it can melt down metal. And that's incredibly hot. You need like a massive factory to do that, but to melt down like millions and millions of gallons, not even gallons, tons of metal, takes a ton of power. So let's try the fiery hot. Whoa. Oh, jeez, that is very hot. Okay, so, jeez, and it gets hotter as you go even deeper, because the deepest layer of the Earth is the inner core. Now, the inner core is also made primarily of iron and other metals, and it's also even hotter than the layer that melted it. But, oh, jeez. But it's under so much gravitational pressure from the other layers, because that's really heavy. You've got the crust that we all live on, plus the mantle, which is like 50 times thicker than that. Plus, you've got the layer of metal on top of it that's almost like half the size of the mantle, but still really huge. And then you've got the inner core. This is a comatose heat level habanero pepper sauce. So this is the last video you hear from me. You understand why. But this is the inner core. Oh, God. Oh, God. That is very hot. So we've got our layers of the Earth. The crust, mild. The mantle, oh, I'm crying, hot. The outer core, fiery hot. And the inner core, comatose level hot.